Hey, everybody, welcome back to Overcoming Average. Finally, kind of getting back in the saddle. Dan, I just met you a few minutes ago, and I was just telling you how with 3 kids, for some reason, I can't find the time to do things that I would like to do. Right. You got to take care of the kids, you got to do life. But luckily, fall is starting to wind down, and life is settling in. So, Dan, you're running for Davidson commissioner. And before we get into that, I just want to ask you, kind of like I said before, the framework of who is Dan Ryan? Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Because I can tell by your accent you're not from North Carolina. So yeah, let's. We've already hit it off. We've got both technology backgrounds and all that. So we'll get into that. But yeah, so where did Dan Ryan come from?
Well, first, Chad, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you, meet you, and use this forum to get my name out there. It's important in a small town, a political event like the election we're having coming up in a couple of weeks, to get my name out there as a first-time candidate. I've never run for public office before. So I'm Dan Ryan, and I'm originally from New York. I was born in Flushing Hospital in Queens, New York in 1977. The son of a New York City Police Department homicide detective and a nurse. 2 brothers. I'm the middle of 3 boys. And
Same. I'm the middle of 3.
Are you?
Yeah. Common ground.
And now you have daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Same. You know, it's funny
2
how
daughters
that,
for you.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out. So my wife of 15 years, Kelly, and I, we moved to North Carolina just coming up on 8 years ago. I'd been commuting in and out of Manhattan from our home in North Jersey for a bunch of years when we first got married and had our oldest daughter. And it was a lot. I mean, the taxes there are a lot. The lifestyle is a lot.
Right.
It's $350 at that point a month to take the train in and out of the city.
Wow. And
our property taxes were close to $16,000 a year. And we were living in in North Carolina in terms of a very, very small home.
Right.
And so we were not necessarily looking to move to Charlotte. It was more of we had an opportunity to spend Easter with some friends in the north side of Atlanta, and we were kind of exposed to
the South,
and all its glory.
The new North.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but thankfully,
we hope not, right?
Thankfully. And we started talking about the idea of just having a different lifestyle and a different life for our at the time our 3-year-old and would be our second daughter, which at that point we didn't know we were having. And we said, kind of just on a whim, let's put the house on the market and see what happens. And we sold the house in New Jersey in 24 hours.
Wow.
And then we were homeless. And we said, all right, I guess we're moving. And I was telling you before, I worked for a large IT company at that point, Cisco Systems. And I was able to get myself transferred, to the Charlotte office and do my job here. And we've been very blessed since. I mean, the biggest regret I have about moving to North Carolina is that I didn't do it 10 years sooner.
Really?
Yeah.
So what was the year again?
2013.
2013.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've only been here for really not that long.
That's
in consideration. Correct. So I, on the other hand, was born in Charlotte in Presbyterian Hospital. So Davidson to me was the town you don't drive fast through, which is still the case.
Right.
But that was it. There were no awesome coffee shops. There was nothing here.
Right.
So my childhood doctor was here, and that was about it. It was just kind of a little small, cute town you drive through. And now I'm a resident, which we're super happy to be here.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and ask you about the technology. So what got you into Cisco and that whole path of technology?
Well, I graduated college and the .com thing was happening, and I was a political science major, and I had gotten a job with a small web hosting company as a project manager. I was very much in debt from student loans. So I had some aspirations and dreams of going to law school and pursuing that path. But I had so much college debt that I had to start paying down that the idea of adding to that number and adding years just wasn't,
Right.
It was always something I'll get back to that, but I got to pay this off first.
Yeah.
So I got this job, just a job as a project manager in a IT hosting, web hosting company. And that company got acquired by a larger telecom called Quest Communications.
Yep.
And Quest Communications is now CenturyLink. And my journey kind of started there. I was, doing this project management thing. It was an administrative role. And I started to become friends with some of the network guys. And they needed a young 20-something-year-old guy there was all these plans to build out these data centers around the United States. And they, the manager came to me one day and said, how would you think about coming to join my team? Do you want to, we train you up and teach you how to do this? And I was like, I don't know the difference between an IP address and subnet mask. I don't know any of that. Like, no thanks. I'm good at my little job here. He said, look, it's not rocket science. We'll get you to Cisco boot camp. And I became a CCNA and I went on the road for 2 or 3 years and I got hands-on GSRs, 6509s, catalyst switches, things like that. And I was able to build and configure large scale, which, in today's day and age would be nothing, but 2 gig fiber connections. They're like, oh my God, we're changing the world with 2 gig. But
so political science, legal and technology.
Yeah.
So do you think yourself as a left brain, right brain? What are you?
I have never stopped to consider that. So
it sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, maybe. So I was doing this thing where I was traveling around, and then Quest became they bought US West, and they became this big monster company. And the time my boss called me and she said, your job in New York is going to be eliminated. You have 2 options. We can lay you off, or you can move to Denver. And so I took the latter, and I moved to Denver, Colorado, and I lived out there for 2 years. And then the .com bubble burst, and the capital budgets and things like that started to go away. I was the lowest paid person on the team, so I was never really worried about losing my job, but it also wasn't fun. I was doing circuit migrations, in Sunnyvale at 2 or 3 in the morning from my apartment, and the job itself wasn't the same. And so I said, this is what I want to do anymore. I became friends. I had become friends with a Cisco account manager and he was also a New York guy. And from there, it was just kind of, hey, you should really think about kind of coming to work. I loved the technology that Cisco was building and bringing to market. And the market, I met with a guy, Matt Santos, who runs Davidson Provision Company. And I had listened to a podcast that he was a part of. And he talked about back then, he was a technology guy too. And back then, nobody thought technology it wasn't a glamorous field to be in. And especially in 2000 and 2001, I mean, the .com, people thought it was fraud. I mean, Bernie Ebbers, Joe Naccio, guys like that, they were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for all the wrong reasons.
Right.
And now we're launching, Jeff Bezos into space, and like everyone wants to be part of IT, and it's this whole thing. And so when I was a part of it, it wasn't this glamorous, career path. And my parents were, do you selling computers? What? Can you fix my computer? I can't get on AOL. And
that sounds all too familiar.
Yeah. I can't get on AOL either. Why are you even trying?
Yeah.
So I moved back to New York, and I took an SE role where I was a systems or sales engineer.
Yep.
And I was doing for Verizon, and I was doing big technology projects for larger companies on the telecom side. I had always had my eye towards getting into Cisco. Cisco certified, Cisco t-shirts, big Cisco guy, and I wanted to. I love the culture of the company. I thought the people that worked there were some of the smartest people I'd ever met.
Yeah,
and I wanted to be part of that. So ultimately, I got in there in 2007. I became an employee as an account manager, as a salesperson, carrying a bag and selling to hedge funds and private equity firms in New York City. And I can very distinctly remember getting home from a day at work and telling my wife, I have made it. I'm selling to banks, hedge funds, and private equity at the end of 2007. And then 2008 comes around, and my arrival was very short-lived. So Bernie, so I had Madoff investment firms as one of my largest customers. Yeah. And,
wow.
So I was right in the thick of that. And, I mean, not that I was a part of any of it, but I was in that building every week. I was in that building.
Wow.
The Lipstick Building, they call it, over on 3rd Avenue. And I, and I worked there for 10 years and 9 years until I got down into Charlotte, and I spent 2 years here with Cisco before I transitioned out and I went into the reseller space, which you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Where I got exposed to a larger portfolio of technology, not just on the network side, but on server virtualization, storage, and then cloud. Cloud's become a big thing in our industry. And then I ultimately got over to VMware, which is where I've been for 4 years, and just selling to 2 large clients here in the Charlotte region, and really enjoying my life.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have another podcast that I don't tell many people about. It's for my company, and we just talk about technology. So I like easily can slide into that conversation. Yeah. And I mean, we live in a world where we're just tied to cell phones and computers, and companies can be just brought to their knees if their servers go down. It's crazy. So that's a really important thing to be in. Virtualization, we talk about it on our other podcast as well. It's just basically maximizing your server hardware, and it allows for more uptime, and you can do upgrades and stuff overnight, which, nowadays people work 24/7 on their computers. So it's super, super important. So thanks for your tech contribution. Yeah. Nobody ever thanks us, right? We need the thanks every once in a while. So tell me about how you got into politics. Honestly, that to me is one of the most intriguing things. Is you don't meet politicians often. Mm-hmm. You don't meet people who are even running for office often. Mm-hmm. And if they seem like just far-fetched. So tell me about the mental process. Like when you said, okay, I'm going to go for this, mm-hmm. and what's the journey been like?
Well, first, I'm not in politics. Right? I'm not there yet.
Right.
We're running towards that finish line. We'll see how it works out. I truly believe. I wake up every day and we have today. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That outcome is not really in my hands. I truly believe that, and I'm just going to do the best that I possibly can. And the outcome will be what the outcome. My hope, honestly, is that I just learn something from this, and I, personally, and then also to give back to the community, and in hopes that I can give back to the community. And whether I win or if I don't win, my hope is that my candidacy will at least shine some light on issues that I think are important.
Sure. So,
I've always had opinions. There's been lots of times over the last. Well, I'm 40, almost 44. So the last 40 years where I've offered some thoughts and opinions on things in private settings, public settings. And, I'd seen some of the things that the current administration had been doing and undertaking. And I thought to myself, there are some of these things I disagree with. There's a lot of things that our local government is responsible for that I agree with, that I think they've done a good job. This slate of commissioners and mayor were elected in 2017 together. They were reelected in 2019. And I think they've done some really good things. The MI connection, which you may or may not be familiar with, they were able to untangle that. They've definitely brought transparency to government that didn't previously exist. And I think those two feats are commendable. I think they've gone in a different direction over the last 12 months, 18 months, where their focus seems to be on things that local governments should not be focusing on. And my entire platform is to bring balance to the town government. Mm. And, my thoughts were, when the non-discrimination ordinance was put in front of the town, and there was an outcry from both sides, it was a very controversial issue. I was kind of just wondering what they were hoping to accomplish and what problem they were solving that isn't already solved at a state level or a federal level, that the town of Davidson was now going to create a citizen tribunal to weigh, whether you were nice to somebody or not, and is that based on how that person looks? And I thought it was a terrible climate that we'd create for our businesses. And I also thought, more importantly, it was an awful precedent to set from a neighbor versus neighbor situation. So now we can take neighbor versus neighbor disputes, which unfortunately happen, and have a third party kind of arbitrate them, which seemed unnecessary.
Wow.
So that was kind of the catalyst for me to say these commissioners are heading in a direction that I think is dangerous, and it's something that's not good for the town. So that's when I started to think about to run, because there are other issues that are important to me: economic development, the lack of commercial development out here on the eastern side of town, the lack of, we've been here for 8 years. You went to the doctor here 20 years ago. Have the roads changed in 20 years? Have we?
No.
Right. So, and I've been doing this since April, and I get the NCDOT, and there's always a reason not to do something.
Sure.
Always a reason not to do something. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try and do something. Maybe I'll try, because I can point my finger and at something or somebody and say, you should do this and you should do that. But it's my responsibility as a citizen, as a resident, as a father, and as a husband. If I want to see these things done, and I think it's the right thing, then I have a responsibility. I can't. From my perspective, this town's given us so much. We're so happy here, and my daughters are thriving here, and by the grace of God, they'll graduate high school here and go to hopefully a state school in North Carolina. That will hopefully be what this town has given. And I would like to give something back to that. And my thoughts were, I've got these ideas. Now, listen, the town may not like my ideas. There may be a large groundswell of people that think my ideas are terrible. There is a constituency of people that think the non-discrimination ordinance is a great idea. If those that's the thing about living in this country is we have the opportunity to present ideas, and if they're agreeable, you'll vote for me. If they're not, you won't, and we'll see if I win. Like I said, I have no expectations around the outcome here. I'm trying to be as true to myself as possible. I'm putting plans forward publicly, which for I guess I'm not sure if my opponents will be doing that at some point. I haven't seen anything. And I don't know if this town is, and I'm not sure if the campaign is just going to be smiles and I'm running for office and here's who I am. And that's going to be enough to get somebody elected. Maybe it is. And maybe me putting stuff out plan wise and giving people reasons not to like the plan is going to be a detriment to my campaign. And it's very possible.
Well, I'm pretty old school in this way, but I feel like we live in a world of intellectual laziness where people don't take the time to investigate issues on their own, and maybe issues they've never even thought about. Like, well, what would you do in that situation? Or do you think this ordinance or this thing is a good idea? I think that people don't take the time to investigate the policies. They investigate, would this be better? Has it been better in other cities? And we just kind of go with the same old.
Right.
And there's a lot of, I know my generation and below, it's especially bad. People don't know what to think. So they just kind of think whatever's popular or whatever their friends think. And maybe they haven't done the research either. So I commend you for putting your stuff out there to see. Granted, I haven't read it either, but I would like to see, like, okay, would that be a good idea? Because the next struggle, I think, happens when you have discourse about, hey, here's an idea, and maybe it's not a great idea, but if you talk about it, I really think we can get back to a place in the political realm, I hope, where we can have win-wins, because it seems like for a really long time, it's win-lose. we're going to stomp your idea out, and but that's not the way humans work. I mean, it's like try to have a win-lose in a spouse relationship or with your child. You can't do that. You have to we're neighbors. We live together. So I think putting the stuff out there and then having discourse about it, asking people's opinions, and then saying, hey, let's come up to what we as a community think is going to be the best.
Yeah. And so that's an excellent point, Chad. I've spoken with a lot of people in town, and in town being in Davidson. And since I've been doing this since April, a lot of one-on-one coffees, a lot of small group things, and we don't always agree. There's a lot of different, there's Commissioner Michael, I met with her for 2 hours. Commissioner Michael and I probably have never voted for the same person ever in the 20 plus years that I've voted. But I got to know her as a woman, as a mother, as a lawyer. She's traveled and we got to know each other, and there was no animosity there was nothing unpleasant about the entire interaction. And I could say that frankly for every conversation that I've had.
Yeah.
I think if you put two neighbors across the table from each other with a cup of coffee between them, there's there's more that binds us than that separates us as a community and as a state, as a country. And I think you're right. I mean, I think the media in today's day and age is profitable by taking the lunatics on the left and the lunatics on the right and giving them microphones and having them scream at each other.
Well, going back to the technology stuff, I was thinking about the evolution of social media and how I remember my first Facebook invitation, when somebody said, hey, you got to check this thing out, Facebook. And then, Instagram and Twitter, and now we're on to TikTok and stuff. And it's well known now that these apps and things are designed for the quick fix of seeing something. So, this sounds like a sort of a diversion, but it's like we're wired to we're looking for like something that's funny or something that's tragic or something crazy that we can then, oh, look at this thing that I saw. And we just flip through and flip through and flip through as fast as we can without taking the time to actually say, hey, this isn't really real life. Real life is, I'm just trying to go to work today. I just want my kids to have a good life. That's where those coffee conversations are so important, because you sit down across from somebody and you realize, this guy, this girl, they're just trying to be left alone. They're trying to do their thing. Hopefully they're trying to do a little bit better. Maybe we get outside of the sphere of ourself. And I'm a big believer in you start with yourself. Don't try to correct the world. Try to correct yourself, and then your family, and then maybe your community. Right. There's very, very, very few people that impact the world. There's very few people that impact their neighborhood, to be honest. I mean, in this little stretch of the neighborhood, you've got everybody from the extrovert that comes out and talks all the time to the person you don't even know their name. They've been here for a couple of years. So, I think getting some perspective on real people having conversations, they're not easy conversations, because I don't know two humans that fully agree with everything.
Right.
And with all these people, you're going to have different opinions, but we can all come to, hey, this is what is the best. And, and that's why we vote, hopefully, to vote for this guy has the policy. This guy has the same frame of mind, the same paradigm that I have. And that's what I want my life to be like. That's why I'm going to vote for that person.
Yeah. And I think, every resident of Davidson gets 5 votes for commissioner. There's 8 of us running, and you get 5 votes. I'm offering a choice. I'm offering a choice of there are 6 registered Democrats, and this is a nonpartisan race. But the interesting thing about that is it's a nonpartisan race until the first debate we're having next week, on October 6th, is being moderated by an extremely liberal Democrat from college professor from Davidson College. And you don't have to go as far as her Twitter feed to find out, what her worldview is. And so the idea that this is all nonpartisan, it doesn't matter what your political party is, and streetlights and sidewalks don't matter or don't require partisan politics, is absolutely right. And that's why I'm running, because the board has been injecting politics into the local conversation for the last at least year, if not longer. And the idea that we're now just going to all, pretend like that politics isn't, or partisanship isn't part of this. And what I'm offering the voters of Davidson is balance. There are many 5-0 votes on the current board, because there's a lot of groupthink and there's a lot of people that are all registered to the same party and they all vote the same way. So they all get on their in their 3 and 4 hour commissioner meetings, and they talk about, lots of words are used, and they spend the time to espouse their political views and their partisan political views. So I could run my campaign as who I'm, a father and a husband and a soccer coach, and this is what I do professionally. But what I found since April is that not a lot of people care about that. They kind of want to know, when you're having coffee with them, where you sit on these issues. And I could come onto this podcast and be very vanilla and just say all kind of the catchphrases, and just like, I'm here, for this or for that, and not give you my ideas or my opinions. But then how honest am I being with you and with the voters? If you don't know who I am and where I stand on these issues, then, you may vote for me because I have a good, nice lawn sign. I mean, that's
a nice lawn sign.
It is a nice lawn sign. Or you may vote for me because your friend, someone knows my wife and their friends. And I hope, I hope I get votes like that. But my real hope is that people tune in and they understand the issues that are in front of the town. We've got substantial challenges around pedestrian safety. We've got empty storefronts in town. We have a labor crisis. It's not a labor shortage. It's a labor crisis that is not unique to Davidson. And these are issues that the local government can be doing something about. Yeah. And I've laid forward plans to manage and deal with some of those issues. Like I said, you could disagree with those plans, or you could agree with them. I encourage you to find out, where everyone stands on these things. Absolutely. And then make a decision. And if the candidate that you support or that you think you're going to support, ask that person where they stand on economic development. Ask them why the government, the town of Davidson, our economic development budget has been sliced in half in the last 4 years. So do we want economic development? Do we want businesses to come to this town? Do we want our residents in Eastern Davidson, which is where you and I live, have to drive 30 minutes to get a gallon of milk? Because that's currently what the situation is. Yeah. We talk about traffic. We talk about, everyone, the traffic's a problem. Everyone you talk to says the same thing. And I'm not going to fix traffic in 2 years. Yeah. And anyone that tells you that they are is not being honest with you. Sure. But what I can tell you is the plans I'd like to see put in place will take cars off the road going from Eastern Davidson into Western Davidson or into the center part of town. If you can put some sort of light commercial, and there's 3 approved commercial nodes, one right here in front of West Branch, one in front of Davidson East, and one on Shear Road and East Rocky River. If you can put, I'm not talking about drive-throughs. I'm not talking about dry cleaners. I'm talking about light commercial, a brewery, a restaurant, something of that sort, that'll give folks in this part of town, which are very, very numerous. There's thousands of people that have moved to this part of town since 2015, 2010, however far back you want to go. Yep. And our options are to either drive into Davidson or to drive to Huntersville and spend our tax dollars there, or spend our dollars that'll ultimately be tax revenue for those towns. And I think we should have a better choice. When I talked to Brad in July, we both kind of circled around the idea we deserve nice things too. I mean, we pay a lot of money in taxes to live in Davidson. Yep. And I think we can solve several problems by just having smart, sensible, balanced planning that includes traffic remediation and economic development. And then I think that adds to, there's a lot of discussions here, and I know I'm just kind of going on here.
No, that's great.
Yeah. There's a lot of focus on the current government around affordable housing. We spend a lot of money from the town on affordable housing. We force the developers in town to spend a lot of money on affordable housing, either payments in lieu, or they have to put 12% of any new housing development has got to be deemed affordable. Now, you can argue whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. And I would argue that the town in general likes this idea, and they want affordable housing options, and it's hard to disagree with that. But when you put affordable housing units in River Run or in Narrow Passage or in Davidson Farms or in West Branch, and you don't offer affordable options to live, you don't offer, you're not giving everyone that lives in those places needs a car. So, and then if they get a car, if they have a car and they can drive into town, their options in town are $4 cup of coffee, a $12 hamburger, or there's no affordable options to eat in town. So if we want to have affordable housing, I think we absolutely should have affordable housing, but we've got to have affordable living. And the only way to get affordable living is through economic diversity and options. And when you don't have, when those options aren't available to our citizens, it drives the prices up. And you've got restaurants in town, which we love, Flatiron and Kindred. Those are not cheap places to eat though. So how often can you go to a Kindred and have a meal? The food there is amazing. And we love going to Kindred, and we love that the folks that own Kindred live in town. The same with Flatiron, the same with Mandolinos. Those are all residents of Davidson. They own their businesses. We want to support those businesses as much as we can, but they're not cheap options. And again, I don't want to see drive-throughs. I don't want to see any of that. The things that I've gotten feedback on, like, well, he wants to develop this, and as if I'm not a developer. I've never developed anything in my life. So I just want options. Yeah. And I think that the government should be involved with facilitating those options. And that's a big part of my platform.
Just from an outsider's perspective, it's, or I guess an insider in a way, it's sort of hard to do both, to have affordable living, but not the other. Like, we don't want a Taco Bell drive through at the entrance of West Branch or River Run, but we want affordable housing, and what does that mean? So, and going back to like the balance of powers and political, people are going to inject their ideas. And as humans, that's the way we're designed. We have an analytical side and we have an emotional side. And that seems to be sort of the dividing line on political parties as well. But people, rather than look for that win-win that I was talking about, just they will die on their side, just to disagree with somebody. It's good to have these conversations and to make the residents think, well, what do I think? How do I feel? What do I want? Do I want a Taco Bell or not? And it should be up to the people that live here. But, I get both sides. Part of the charm of Davidson is the fact that it's Davidson and it hasn't changed. There's part of that charm, but then there's also like, well, it's not the same though. I mean, I wouldn't have this house had it not been for whoever sold this cornfield to become West Branch. I would have never had this life, these neighbors. And so it's offered me a fantastic new life. And all of my neighbors around, we love West Branch. We love all of our neighbors in River Run and around. So again, balance, open-mindedness, conversation.
Right. And so there's 5 commissioners, right? There's 5 commissioners. And as we were saying before, you get 5 people in a room together, they're going to have 5 different ideas about whether the sky is blue. Yeah. And I don't have any thoughts that if I'm elected that, I'm going to run into town hall and all of my ideas are going to be adopted, or some of these things that I think are bad ideas won't be adopted. They will be adopted because I'm one person of 5. And as we were talking before we started the podcast, I'm in the business world. Win-wins are that's business. I mean, you might get a win-loss and you might do that once. You may get the win at somebody else's expense, and that might happen once, but you're never going to come back and get that second win. And if you want to forge partnerships in business and be successful in doing so, you've got to seek out driving value and finding a way for both parties to meet somewhere. And it's not this craziness that we see in our political world today, where there's no compromise, and the idiots on the right, if they're seen to be compromising with the people on the left, then they're traitors or they're rhinos, right, and they're this and they're that. And then the same with the people on the left. Like, we can't have an infrastructure bill that everyone agrees we need to have, right, unless we tie a $3.5 trillion human infrastructure bill to it. Everyone in Washington agrees that the good idea is the $1.2 trillion deal. But we're going to hold that hostage because we want this other thing that not everyone thinks is a good idea. The business world doesn't run that way. That whole concept of what's happening right now in Washington, that would never happen in the real world, in the business world, because it's just, you've got to give, and you've got to give to get, and you've got to be able to compromise, and you've got to be able, otherwise we just get in this period of, which is what for the last, I would say 10 years, where Washington has been unable to do anything. The Republicans were in charge for 2 years in 16 to 18, and they got a tax cut through, and the Democrats were in charge from 2008 to 2010, and they got Obamacare through. But then other than that, there's been nothing,
right,
and I think that's a victim of the media, and I think social media adds to it. I think Twitter, and I think a lot of these things just have created a world where people that have so much in common as Americans, people that have so much to be grateful for as Americans. I mean, you can see what's happening on our southern border now. People are piling in just for the opportunity to live here and to work here. People are dragging their families thousands of miles. And yet it's almost like we're squandering it. We're not looking at the forest from the trees. We look at the problem, we see this, and we don't like, and it's, instead of just saying, we are a community, we're going to have varying ideas, we're going to come from different backgrounds. We're going to have a community like Davidson, North Carolina, which, is in the South, and can embrace a guy like Dan Ryan, an Irish Catholic kid from New York with his wife and 2 daughters, and embrace me as if I'm, part of the fabric of the community. And that's what's really attracted us to being here. And it's why I want to be more of a part of it. I applied for the planning board before I ran, and unfortunately my application was not accepted. So it's possible that I wouldn't even be sitting here if that application had been accepted. But I want to be part of it.
Well, with the technology and the spreading of ideas, I think it's absolutely dangerous and abhorrent to silence ideas, no matter how bad they are. And I know that's a slippery slope, but people's ideas need to be out there for the world to hear. And then other people need to think through it, genuinely take the time to think, is this a better option? Is this a better idea to better my life and my family's life and my community's life?
Right.
And, it's, I feel like in the past 8 to 10 years, maybe it's just my age, but I feel like, everything's political now.
Yes.
Everything is political. Everything has a political bent to it, whether it's the coronavirus or racism or gentrification or the fact that you hired somebody. It doesn't matter. It's all got a political agenda attached to it.
All right.
And so I really appreciate you even taking the time to come on. I think just the fact that you even responded was great. I honestly didn't expect that. Maybe if you get into office, then you won't respond. But
no, I'll respond.
But let me ask you just a commoner question. What does a commissioner do? What's the job of a commissioner?
So the commissioner, there's 5 commissioners, as I mentioned, and 1 mayor. And the mayor, so that's what makes up your local Davidson government. And we're a town of 13,500 people, roughly. And the commissioners vote on different policies, ordinances, legislation, and they are the voting, group within the government.
Okay.
So then there's town staff. And that's led by a gentleman by the name of Jamie Justice. And then all the staff report to him. So the planning department, the parks department, I believe the police department reports directly to Jamie, fire department, and that's town staff. And so those are the people that run the town. And the commissioners are responsible for the town budget, voting on the town budget, having their interests represented in the town budget, which is a budget of about $13 million. And before I forget to mention this, in March of this year, the federal government passed the American Rescue Plan, and that was the plan that people got checks, stimulus checks as part of the COVID relief. But a big part of that plan was distribution of federal dollars directly to states and to municipalities. So Davidson is scheduled or has already received, I have not been able to kind of figure this out, $3.5 to $4 million worth of federal dollars that the next group of commissioners is going to be responsible for spending. Now, the rules around that, as far as I can tell, they started talking about it at the last meeting, and they authorized some money to be spent out of that from the last meeting. But the rules around whether they have to be for shovel-ready construction projects or they have to be ready, the funds have to be used for X, Y, and Z, or they can't be used to save. You can't save the money. None of that has been publicized on what the money is going to be used for. But the commissioners are going to have, basically $4 million on top of the regular budget in the coming year or two to really kind of shape what Davidson's going to look like. It's a substantial injection of federal dollars,
sure,
a once in a lifetime injection of federal dollars. So your commissioners are going to have a say on where that money's spent and how it's spent. And I think that's why it's, every election's important. But what do we want Davidson to look like in 2035 when there's 20,000 residents here? And I think these dollars, now listen, the $3.5 million is a lot of money, but it's also not going to solve all of our sidewalk problems and all of our side path problems, or, it's not going to add a traffic circle or any of that. I mean,
sure,
you can start some of these things maybe, but the fact of the matter is you need more money than that, and you're going to need way more time. So I don't want to set the idea that this money is going to be, it's going to change everything, because it's not enough money to change everything. But I think smartly spent, it's money that could really start framing what this town will look like moving forward. And your commissioners are going to have, like I said, a direct say in how that money's spent and where it's spent and what this looks like. So I think it's important that residents know that number one, that we have this injection of money, and number two, the responsibility of government and where that responsibility starts, and just as importantly, where it stops, because government can't solve all of our challenges. I mean, there's things that I've had a lot of people say things to me about, well, what about CMS and the school and this and that? I have opinions on that, but it doesn't really matter what my opinions are, because as a commissioner, you don't really get to say anything about what happens in CMS. Now, another thing that's come up is 2 weeks ago, there's a large housing development that got approved in Cornelius. That's a stone's throw away, a legitimate stone's throw away from Davidson K8. And, rightfully citizens were upset about that. And I was too. And I thought, well, where was our interest there? Where were our meetings with the Cornelius commissioners? And I have relationships with a few of those commissioners. And I asked them, I said, did anyone in Davidson ever call you guys to say, hey, you're putting a huge housing development really close to critical infrastructure for our town, really, really close to it. Can we get, whether you listen to our feedback or not, it doesn't matter, but we should at least be on the record to say, we're Davidson. This is a critical infrastructure with our school. You're talking about, you're going to impact us by doing this. And what I was told was that an email went over the day before they voted, and that was it. And that project had been on the docket for 4 years. So, That's information that I think citizens should be aware of. My position on it is we should be open and collaborative with our neighbors and not on an island that, Davidson does things the Davidson way. Because I think that's fine. We like the charm and we like Davidson being its own place, and we don't want to be Huntersville and we don't want to be Cornelius. We would have moved to those places if we wanted that, right? Yeah. I don't want that either. But we also need to collaborate with our neighbors, and especially it's something regional at a regional level where traffic and pedestrian safety are going to directly impact us and our citizens.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like I said, I don't know if I was on as a commissioner, last year or last month, if I would have changed Cornelius's direction, I probably wouldn't have, but they would have known that we had substantial concerns and that we would want to be involved in the planning of that.
Right.
And the next group of commissioners is going to have a very similar challenge on our eastern border here with Kannapolis, as 3,000 homes are under consideration there. And the idea that 3,000 homes are going to be added directly on our border, and that's not going to tax our infrastructure it's naive. It's going to absolutely tax our infrastructure. So we have three choices. One, we can get involved with Kannapolis to figure out how this will work and find a win-win for them and for us, because they're going to act in their own best interest. Two, we can start making investments now into our infrastructure on the eastern side of town, because what we know is going to come, which is going to be more traffic.
Sure.
Or three, we can do nothing. And three, we do nothing, and then what do we look like in 5 years?
Right.
And that's adding 3,000 residents that are not Davidson residents.
Sure.
So what do we want to do as a town in response to this? Stick our head in the sand and say it's not going to happen, or it's going to happen in 5 years and we don't have to worry about it. We'll worry about it then. By then it's going to be too late, because now we've got the cars and we've got the people, and those people that are moving in there they're going to love the charm of downtown Davidson as much as we all do. And that East Rocky River Road, our east to west connections are all going to be clogged up. And, then do we do something? Is that?
That's very interesting, because like you said, the allure and the charm of Davidson is going to attract people, but there's other options where they can be right beside us and impact the infrastructure. Absolutely.
Right.
I didn't even know that. That's right. I saw the plans for Cornelius, which in a way, I've heard about the old Mech place, and that seems kind of exciting and fun. But then you think, wow, all those people right next to Davidson K8, that's going to be a traffic nightmare.
Well, I think from what I can gather, and again, this is completely unscientific, but from what I can gather, universally, there seemed to be a high percentage of people that wanted that OMB there.
Yeah.
I mean, from everywhere. I mean, there's people in Davidson that are traditionally anti-development that thought that was a great idea, even if there was going to be a traffic impact to us on Main Street. The challenge was the developer in Cornelius came back and said, I need 650 or 800. They asked for 800 apartments because they wanted the walkability to OMB to support the brewery, not on the weekends. And Cornelius, gave them that. So that became phase two. Phase one, everyone agreed with. I think phase two, folks were like, wait a minute, that's not
exactly what I thought. I was like, wait, I thought this was supposed to be cool. And now,
So, again, is
OMB still going there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So again, it's outside of our jurisdiction.
Sure.
There's not a whole lot that Davidson, Rusty or the commissioners, they weren't going to be able to vote on it. So, maybe it's a little bit unfair for me to sit, to sit from the peanut gallery here and have an opinion on it. I just would have thought that, or hoped that our interests would have been better represented. I watched the planning board meeting, and I watched several of the Cornelius commissioner meetings, waiting for someone from our government to show up. There were a lot of people there upset from antiquity, and it's their government, so they're right to show up and have their voice heard. But I would have thought that we would have had some representation there. But
yeah, I think when I saw it, I was actually looking around office space, and I saw somebody showed me the plan, and I was shocked too. Like, wow, it's right on top of the school.
Yes, it's right on top of the school.
And you're right. I mean, what can be done, but to have a voice would be nice.
Right.
So, well, hey, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast.
Thanks
it's
for
been
having
a pleasure.
me.
When do we vote and where do we vote?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So early voting actually starts October 14th
Okay.
in Charlotte. So you can go vote in Charlotte if you want, October 14th.
Okay.
But October 20th through October 30th or 31st, I'd have to go look at the website,
Okay.
but it's somewhere October 20th to the 30th or 31st. You can early vote in Davidson at the Davidson Library.
Okay.
So that's a big change this year. It's the first time that the Mecklenburg County's offered that, which is great for Davidson residents because historically we'd have to go to Cornelius Town Hall to early vote. And then, of course, Election Day is November 2nd, which is the following Tuesday.
Great. Dan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you on the other side.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks.
All right.